Tensions have been high on the Korean peninsula for many years, with North Korea frequently making news for its aggressive stance towards the United States. But why does this small, isolated country have such strong hostility toward a superpower so far away? North Korea's animosity towards the US is rooted in a history of war, conflicting ideologies, and a fight to survive in a world where those who control the narrative often hold the most power. Historical roots of hostility. The Korean War, which erupted in 1950, was a devastating conflict that shattered the Korean peninsula. North Korea, supported by China and the Soviet Union, launched a surprise invasion of South Korea, leading to a brutal 3-year war against South Korea and US-led United Nations forces. The war was catastrophic, leading to the deaths of approximately 2.5 million people, including a significant number of civilians. The conflict ended in 1953 with a ceasefire, not a formal peace treaty, leaving North and South Korea divided along the 38th parallel. This division was marked by the creation of the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, a heavily fortified border that remains one of the most tense and militarized areas in the world, symbolizing a war that has never officially ended. The war's impact on North Korea was particularly severe. The US conducted an extensive bombing campaign that targeted key cities and infrastructure across the north. By the end of the war, the US had dropped over 635,000 tons of bombs, including 32,557 tons of napalm, on North Korea. This relentless bombardment destroyed nearly every major city and industrial center, leaving much of the country in ruins. The devastation was so profound that it fostered a deep sense of fear and resentment towards the United States that still lingers in North Korea's national psyche today. This legacy of destruction has been ingrained in the North Korean narrative, contributing to the regime's enduring suspicion and hostility towards the US. The human cost of the regime. Life in North Korea is marked by a level of repression and fear that is almost unimaginable to outsiders. The regime's human rights abuses are pervasive, with one of the most notorious aspects being the network of prison camps, known as Kwanliso. These camps are places of unimaginable horror, where tens of thousands of people are subjected to forced labor, starvation, and brutal treatment. Many are imprisoned not for crimes they have committed, but simply for being related to someone the regime considers a threat. Public executions are also a grim reality, used as a tool to instill fear and maintain absolute control over the population. Surveillance is another pervasive aspect of life in North Korea. The regime closely monitors its citizens, with informants embedded in every community to report any signs of dissent. The state controls all information, ensuring that the only narratives allowed are those that glorify the leadership and vilify the outside world, particularly the United States and South Korea. This isolationist policy makes it nearly impossible for external entities to intervene or apply pressure to improve human rights conditions. The lack of access to independent information means that many North Koreans are unaware of the extent of their suffering or the possibilities of life outside their borders, trapping them in a cycle of oppression. North Korea's cyber warfare capabilities. In the digital age, North Korea has developed a new form of warfare that allows it to punch above its weight: cyber warfare. Despite its economic isolation, North Korea has built a formidable cyber army capable of launching sophisticated attacks against far more technologically advanced nations. One of the most infamous examples is the 2014 cyber attack on Sony Pictures, which was allegedly carried out by North Korean hackers in retaliation for a film that mocked the country's leader. This attack highlighted the regime's ability to strike at its enemies from afar without ever having to engage in traditional military conflict. North Korea's cyber strategy is deeply entwined with its broader military objectives. By focusing on cyber capabilities, North Korea can conduct asymmetrical warfare that disrupts its adversaries' economies and steals valuable resources, particularly cryptocurrency, which is used to fund the regime's illicit activities. These cyber operations provide North Korea with a means to sustain itself economically despite stringent international sanctions, while also allowing it to project power and instill fear on the global stage. Life under the Kim dynasty. The Kim dynasty has maintained its grip on power through the cultivation of an intense personality cult, where the leaders are portrayed as almost divine figures. From the time they can speak, North Koreans are taught to revere Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un as benevolent, omnipotent leaders who have saved the nation from its enemies. This cult of personality is enforced through relentless propaganda that permeates every aspect of life, from education and media to public art and ceremonies. This personality cult is crucial to the regime's stability, as it provides a unifying national identity and distracts from the harsh realities of daily life. The reverence for the Kim family is not just a political tool, but a societal cornerstone that suppresses dissent and ensures loyalty. Anyone who questions the narrative risks severe punishment, including imprisonment or execution, reinforcing the absolute power of the Kim dynasty. The role of China in sustaining the regime. China plays a critical role in sustaining North Korea, providing the economic lifeline that the regime needs to survive. Despite international sanctions, trade with China, both legal and illegal, remains North Korea's primary source of food, fuel, and hard currency. China's support is not just about economics. It is also deeply rooted in geopolitical strategy. For China, North Korea serves as a buffer state that prevents the US-allied South Korea from being directly on its border, which is a critical factor in Beijing's decision to prop up the regime despite its provocations. This relationship, however, is complex. While China supports North Korea, it also occasionally exerts pressure on Pyongyang to curb its most destabilizing behaviors, such as nuclear tests, to maintain regional stability. Yet, Beijing's overriding priority is to avoid the collapse of the North Korean regime, which would lead to a refugee crisis and potentially bring US forces closer to China's borders, a scenario that China is keen to avoid. Cultural life under dictatorship. North Korea's regime maintains its power by exercising strict control over all cultural expressions within the country. The government dictates what can be shown in movies, what music can be played, and even what hairstyles are acceptable, all to reinforce the regime's ideology and suppress any potential dissent. Religion, too, is tightly controlled, with most forms of worship banned except for state-sanctioned practices that glorify the regime. This cultural suppression is designed to ensure that the only narrative allowed is one that supports the Kim dynasty's rule. However, despite these efforts, there is a growing underground movement within North Korea. Smuggled foreign media, particularly South Korean dramas and Western films, are beginning to permeate the country, providing North Koreans with glimpses of life beyond their borders. This illicit cultural exchange is slowly eroding the regime's absolute control over information, leading some North Koreans to question the official narrative they have been fed their entire lives. While still dangerous, this quiet resistance is a testament to the human spirit's resilience in the face of oppression, economic isolation and survival. North Korea's defiance of international norms, particularly through its nuclear weapons program and human rights abuses, has led to a series of increasingly severe sanctions imposed by the United States and the broader international community. Beginning in the early 2000s, these sanctions have been aimed at curbing North Korea's nuclear ambitions by restricting its access to global markets and financial systems. The United Nations, under US leadership, has passed numerous resolutions tightening sanctions, which have targeted everything from North Korea's exports of coal, iron and seafood to its access to crucial oil supplies. These sanctions have severely crippled North Korea's economy, which was already struggling due to its limited industrial capacity and outdated infrastructure. The sanctions have cut off North Korea from most international trade, forcing the regime to rely on illicit activities such as smuggling, cybercrime, and counterfeiting to generate revenue. Moreover, the sanctions have deepened North Korea's dependency on China, which remains its largest trading partner and a critical source of economic support. Despite China's compliance with some international sanctions, it continues to provide essential aid and goods, allowing North Korea to maintain a semblance of economic stability amidst widespread poverty. The economic strategy of JUCHE. Amidst this economic isolation, North Korea has clung to the ideology of JUCHE, self-reliance, as both a guiding principle and a survival strategy. Introduced by Kim Il-sung, JUCHE emphasizes the importance of independence in political, economic, and military affairs. Economically, this has meant a focus on domestic production and minimizing reliance on foreign resources. However, the reality has often been more complex. The regime has promoted military-first policies known as Songun, which prioritize the needs of the military over the civilian economy, further straining resources and leading to chronic shortages of food and basic goods. To sustain itself, the North Korean government has relied heavily on state-controlled industries and a network of black markets, known locally as Jangmadang. These informal markets have become vital for the survival of ordinary North Koreans, providing access to goods that are otherwise unavailable through official channels. Additionally, aid from China, both official and unofficial, has been crucial in keeping the regime afloat. Chinese support includes everything from food and fuel supplies to financial transactions that bypass international sanctions, highlighting the complex relationship between the two nations as North Korea continues to navigate its economic hardships. Nuclear ambitions and global tensions. North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons is driven by a desire to protect itself from what it sees as a threat from the US. The leadership in Pyongyang views nuclear weapons as crucial for preventing attacks like those that happened in Iraq and Libya, which lacked such capabilities. The history of US actions during the Korean War and fears of regime change have strengthened North Korea's belief that nuclear weapons are key to its survival. Additionally, North Korea uses its nuclear program to gain leverage in international negotiations, seeking recognition and aid from the US and others. The US response, pressure and diplomacy. The US has responded to North Korea's nuclear ambitions with a mix of military threats, economic sanctions, and diplomacy. Strategies have included the maximum pressure campaign, aimed at crippling North Korea's economy to force denuclearization. This approach peaked under the Trump administration, which combined sanctions with direct threats of military action. At the same time, Trump engaged in historic summits with Kim Jong-un, but despite these efforts, talks stalled, and North Korea continued developing its nuclear arsenal. The situation remains unresolved, with the US pushing for denuclearization and North Korea insisting on keeping its nuclear weapons. Propaganda and national identity. In North Korea, state propaganda portrays the US as a constant enemy seeking to destroy the country. This narrative justifies the regime's strict policies and military focus. The Kim dynasty uses anti-American sentiment to unify the population and distract from internal problems like food shortages. The regime's portrayal of the US as a threat reinforces its control and the idea that resisting US aggression is essential for North Korea's survival. The belief that the US is a major threat is deeply ingrained in North Korean national identity. This perception is shaped by historical experiences, especially the Korean War, which is depicted as a heroic fight against American imperialism. This worldview influences North Korean society at all levels, from education to military strategy, ensuring that the regime's actions, including its nuclear ambitions, are seen as necessary for national survival. Conclusion: the animosity between North Korea and the United States is rooted in a complex web of history, ideology, and survival. From the devastation of the Korean War to the economic isolation imposed by sanctions, North Korea's hatred of the US is not just a product of propaganda, but a deeply ingrained part of its national identity. As long as the US is seen as a threat to its sovereignty, North Korea will continue to view America with suspicion and hostility. Understanding this dynamic is crucial not only for policymakers, but for anyone interested in the future of global peace and security. If you found this deep dive into North Korea's hostility toward the US insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. What do you think could break the cycle of animosity between these two nations? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This is Economics Buddy, and we'll see you in the next video.